Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place. You are listening to Playing with Fire, where we talk about non-monogamy as a relationship paradigm and my favorite thing in the whole world, individuation. We have a fantastic episode, and
The conversation today, wonderful.
So,
Great.
and
You too.
important. This conversation is important. Dr. Marie Thouin, not her first appearance here on Playing with Fire, and certainly not her last. Marie and I have become really good friends over the past couple of years, and it's been a total pleasure to work with her. And recently, we coined a new word. And so we're going to talk about it. We're going to get in and talk about this word and why this word needs to exist and needed to come into existence. And if you are a person who has been struggling with your jealousy, which you listen to me, so that's, it's likely that you've struggled with jealousy at some point, you're going to want this episode. And if you are curious about what happens when two researchers figure out how to collaborate, this episode might be interesting for you too. Because at heart, it's about relationship. Yep. We talk all the time about how this isn't just about your romantic relationships. This is about all of your relationships and how you do
relating
that
in the world.
Yeah. So Marie is an amazing researcher. She will have a book out soon on Compersion.
Great.
Yes. And she and I both trained at sister universities. So I went to Pacifica graduate. Marie went to CIIS, and we each have PhDs in slightly esoteric areas of psychology and spirituality, transpersonal studies for Marie and depth psychology for me. And there you are over there with your physics.
I'm not totally sure what esoteric means, although I think physics has been described using
I think it just means interesting.
Well, I think that's what I was going to say. I think it's something interesting that we could all use. Yeah.
The reason I introduce her that way is the longer I've gotten to know her, the more I realize that her brilliance weaves throughout all sorts of different work. And this particular episode is just one little instance. So you're going to want to follow Marie for sure. There are details in the show notes about how to do that. But in the meantime, sit back and listen and learn a little bit more about a new word. Welcome, Marie. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's so fun every time I get to talk to you guys.
I love chatting with you. And this week we have something really exciting. So Ken, you're going to ask us questions.
I am going to ask you questions.
Because Marie and I have a thing.
You have a thing. You have a thing. And that thing is a new word, which I think is awesome. It's Comperstruggle.
Comperstruggle.
And before
Comperstruggle.
Yeah. And I wanted to, before we get into that word, let's talk about a couple other words. Just quick. What is jealousy?
Oh, jealousy is the protective threat you feel when there's a threat to your valued love relationship, or when you imagine that there's a threat to a valued love relationship.
Okay. And the follow-up, what is compersion?
Well, compersion is the broad range of positive emotions, thoughts, attitudes, and actions that you can experience in relation to your partner's other relationships.
All right.
You asked the two right people for that.
I did, right? Yes. Now, is there any overlap between them?
There is. There's magical overlap now. There's magical overlap. There's synergistic overlap, right, Marie? Because this word is born out of the fact that we met, and that my jealousy research and your compersion research left us in a space to notice, like, oh, our work overlaps. It's not that it just abuts. It overlaps because jealousy and compersion overlap.
Right. And can we actually create a little parenthesis here and tell the listeners how we met and what we felt when we met?
We should do that. Yeah. Because it was not entirely without a little internal strife for both of us. So Marie and I met, I think we came to know of each other at a time when we were both fresh off of our doctoral dissertations, or right in the throes of it. And I happened to get a spot on a TEDx stage. And that TEDx stage, I was going to talk about jealousy, but then once I was creating my actual talk, the people who were helping design that particular TEDx wanted me to focus on compersion. So I did. So Marie met me because I happened to have a TEDx on her specialty, compersion, even though it is not like my top, which might have caused a little, I'm thinking a little professional envy / jealousy, maybe.
Was like, oh my gosh, that should have been me on that stage. Who is this Joli Hamilton who took my spot?
Yeah.
And then I proceeded to, of course, look up, well, who is Joli Hamilton? Wow, okay, she has interesting work. Let me connect with her. And then once we got in front of each other and had a first conversation, I mean, to me, I don't want to speak for you, but I was just totally in love with you. And
totally. I
my
was like,
jealousy just turned into complete compersion and collaboration and admiration. And like, yes, I want to be in this woman's life.
it was the moment of realizing, because I came into it thinking like, oh, are we going to be competitive? Are we competing for, and this is so meta, right? Are we competing for the space, the attention, the relationship with the concept of compersion? Which is just ridiculous in so many ways, but humans will personify anything. And I think you and I had worked so closely with compersion and with jealousy that for me, those concepts really have this very personal nature. And it felt like any encroachment by someone else did feel threatening. I did feel the like, oh my gosh. And I remember right before our first meeting, I remember thinking, what if she's like kind of mad, like that I didn't know you existed. So I hadn't even cited you in any of my work because I had not found you yet. And yeah, I had all kinds of feelings. And then it was like meeting a sister. It was like meeting somebody I was supposed to meet my whole life. Like, oh, there's plenty of room. And on top of that, if we hadn't studied these things, we wouldn't have met. If we had not fallen in love with the same words.
Really, we fell in love with the same concept and the same opportunity for transformation, that lives in that zone, that very fluid zone between jealousy and compersion.
Right.
And oftentimes we think about those two things as being mutually exclusive or, diametrically opposite. And yes, there is an opposition. But those things are so, together. It's really hard to have one without having the other at some level. And that's why I think our bodies of work are so compatible and complementary.
Totally. And because there is that space where they interweave. And I agree with you, Marie, that there is if it were not for the existence of jealousy, then compersion would not taste so sweet. And if it were not for compersion, jealousy might feel like it is only difficult and challenging. And we might not recognize that, in fact, in that space is, what if there's this third thing? Jung would say we're in the zone of the transcendent function, right? We're the third thing that cannot be born unless these two seemingly oppositional qualities come into interaction. And then this third space occurs. And that's where magic happens.
Okay, I gotta say it. So you two, with your jealousy and compersion, and you two yourselves, you're the peanut butter cup of relationship. That's technology. Right?
The chocolate, the peanut butter, put those hands together. Put them together.
Yes, my favorite snack.
It's
of course it is.
I mean, you can't go wrong with it. You can't.
Yes. And the two of us had a Comperstruggle.
Yeah, we did.
Or at least
I definitely.
You too.
Yeah. Well, and I remember I was so grateful when you brought it up because I think okay, when we get into talking about why this is a struggle. So from the position I was in, I was experiencing having like the upper hand, right? Like I had more. I had gotten on the TED stage. I had gotten the attention, right? Because at core, what we're talking about here is attention. And that's why
Yes.
it's a Comperstruggle for us, even though there's not a third person involved, but we wanted the attention, the whole audience, all of you listening, you all are who we want, right? And so that's who we're in competition for if there's competition. But since I was the one with the stage in this case, I didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't know how to ask, like, hey, is there envy? Is there jealousy? What's going on in here? What might there be between us? So I was so grateful when you brought it up and we're like, only first met.
Okay, so before we get too deep into it, can we get a clear definition of Comperstruggle?
So a Comperstruggle, put very simply, is when you are caught in a mix of jealousy and compersion.
Yeah.
So there's the coexistence of both, and usually it's wanting to feel compersion or having what I would call a compersive attitude, like you really do want the best for the person you love. And yet there are some embodied feelings of jealousy tugging at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is such a beautiful description of the fact that jealousy itself is not usually something someone's seeking.
Right.
Even for those of us, and I count myself amongst, even for those of us who do get some benefits out of jealousy, like I experience arousal with jealousy and that can feel fun, but usually we don't seek it out for in its own right, whereas people do seek out compersion for its own purposes in its own right. They seek it out. And so there can be this feeling, and I think it's great that we decided on a word, because we went through a lot of word possibilities, but we decided on a word that focuses on the compersion, wanting the compersion and struggling. Because for some people, the jealousy might be a huge struggle. For some, it might be a more mild struggle. But the acts that we go through, the machinations, the energy that we put into, okay, I'm going to have to be with the fact that compersion isn't just spontaneously happening and jealousy isn't spontaneously disappearing. And I have to be with this.
Right.
Not simple, not easy.
Right, exactly.
But very normal.
And that really brings us to kind of like fundamentally, like, how do we deal with our emotions? Like it's such a perfect example of learning how to be with emotions that are uncomfortable. And
Right.
like the paradox of at once letting ourselves feel what we feel and not trying to repress it and deny it, but also being able to imagine and move towards a different reality and not be a slave of what we feel all the time.
Right. I appreciate that you said it's a microcosm. It's a way to look at how each of us individually works with our emotions, because I don't think there's one path here. And you and I have talked a lot about I have the jealousy roadmap and you have the compersion roadmap. And okay, so if we link these two up, yeah, but let's just remember they're not one path. It's not like one clear path. You follow these exact steps and everyone's will look the same and it'll all happen in the same order. It's a complex experience of probably passing back and forth between feeling the intensity of your jealousy and your compersion, and everybody deals with that differently. Like I know some people go right to their body and they're like, oh, I'm going to work somatically first. I'm going to go right to my nervous system. And for other people, they need to go in through the intellect. They need to have these ideas. And that's why I think having a word for this is so helpful, because for those of us who who can feel the magic of naming, right? I name this and now it's safe for me to be with this complicated, messy feeling synergy of emotions. There's not just one way, but I think naming really does matter here.
Absolutely.
We've got this potentially confusing, complicated combination of feelings that we've now given a name to. So what do we get out of this? What's good about this situation?
Yes. So of course, Comperstruggle is not easy because, like we might feel ashamed that we have jealousy, and we might feel ashamed about our non-monogamous identities, so it might feel like we're caught between, a rock and a hard place. And what'd be good about it, to me, this kind of struggle is where we really get to decide who we want to be. If we never felt this kind of tension of opposites, we would never really come face to face with like, well, who am I? Like, I'm feeling these different things. And not that you have to choose just one, but it really kind of puts you face to face with that kind of decision point.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we're caught between two paradigms, and Jessica Fern goes into that in her last book, Polywise, like really moving from monogamy to non-monogamy as a paradigm shift. And the Comperstruggle can be a big part of that. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like I want to be in this new paradigm already, but I'm feeling, a lot of what mononormative society told me I should feel. And that's an indication of like, okay, you're in a liminal space at some level.
Right. And what if we have to wrestle with this? You using the word struggle was intentional, right? Like, what if we have to struggle with this because the transition from understanding the world simply as either I feel safe and jealousy is not part of my experience and I don't have to be exposed to jealousy and that's how I find safety. Moving from that to what if I could feel jealous and still be safe? What if in fact my jealousy was yes, an indicator that there might be a potential threat, but what if I could be with that and then actually do the checks? Like what if I have the conversations and I make sure that my agreements are being upheld and they do meet my needs and I'm actually moving through that and I'm attending to my body, and then I be with the fact that, yep, and it might still feel challenging to not have the monogamous gaze of a partner pointed at me all the time. Yep. What if I just have to be with the fact that, yeah, my child self, my infant self, they want all of the attention all the time. And they have
Right.
no desire to deal with anything else. And yet
Mhm.
that's not who I want to be in my adult relationships.
Right.
And that honestly, monogamous or non-monogamous, that's not, I don't want to be demanding all of my partner's attention. And so what if I have to do both? Like see the indicator that jealousy is, and then move at the very least into that attitude of compersion, the wanting to experience and the wanting to be happy for my partner, having a full, rich life.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And oftentimes, that wanting and that intention and that kind of attitude is enough. Like a lot of people think, oh, because I'm not feeling all the compersive feels and I'm not really ecstatic to see my partner go on dates with someone else, I'm not poly enough. I'm not
Oh,
doing this right.
Yeah.
And it can be such a source of shame.
yeah.
But having this intention, this attitude can just really be heroic in itself. And it can create love in a place where love is difficult, where a lot of our conditioning or a lot of our pain causes us to want to shut down. And yet we find a way to love and support our partner anyways. And isn't that beautiful and a gorgeous human experience?
Right. I
I appreciate those opportunities to show up the way we want to and intend to, because without those, I don't know, for myself, without those opportunities, sometimes I just slide and coast, and I don't step up the way I want to. So that's awesome. And so that said, these are some pretty difficult situations you two are describing. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but what can we do to make those moments easier to manage?
well,
Do you want to start?
well, Maria, I wanted to start just because I wanted to name that if the moment itself is difficult, I don't want to overlook the body and, turning to some really basic nervous system hygiene, right? Like you have a body, It has a nervous system. That's the only way you're interpreting the universe. And the only question it's asking, your nervous system is just asking, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? So if it's firing, if it's going off and you're not experiencing safety, and some of us never really experience deep safety, then practicing like daily practices that allow you to ground into the safer, right? Like what's the safer state for you feels so integral to me, to the process of being who I want to be in relationship. Like I am a deeply relationally anxious person. And so if I didn't do that work every single day, I would not be equipped for the moments where it really blows up and it's really difficult and it goes from just being uncomfortable to being a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to lay the groundwork with like day to day, if you are practicing either neurosomatic intelligence, a gentle movement practice, orienting to your space, doing breath work, turning to your whatever tools your body responds well to, that's going to put you on a good starting point to work with this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said earlier, you know, some of us really thrive with more of like the somatic work first, and some of us need to do the mental cognitive work first. So
Yep.
I also want to suggest that some people might want to first name it and do that kind of mental work of understanding, like what is this, and can I bring understanding and compassion and self-compassion into this place internally.
Yeah. Yeah. In the jealousy roadmap, the first two steps are the first two steps I think we point to with every emotional experience, right? Notice it and name it. And if you,
Yes.
and that's why we chose this word. It's because literally every day, each of us is asked, well, what if I can't feel compersion, or what if my jealousy won't turn into compersion, or how do I get it to change? And I think we've both consistently had the same answer, that is, what if you're just in it? What if you're just with it? But if you name that it, can you befriend it? Can you move into, oh, this is normal? It might not be comfortable, but it's normal. And maybe I have to do less in this moment of struggle. Maybe right now I can just be compassionate to myself for like, ooh, this is hard. This
Yes.
moment is hard.
Mhm.
And not be in a rush to be, like you said, like a better non-monogamous person, or like a good poly
Mhm.
person. Because I mean, I've been at this a long time, 15 years, and I've never had a day where I'm like, I feel nothing negative. I'm perfect.
Yeah.
Never been Mary Poppins. So
Oh. Maybe one day.
maybe one day.
Even Mary Poppins was only practically
Oh,
perfect in
that's
every way.
okay. That's true. Okay. I
Yes.
I think naming it is so important, Marie, but what would you say to someone who's like, okay, so I look at this word, and clearly I'm there. I'm in the Comperstruggle. What's your next move?
So once you've named it, then, you know, you can investigate, what is it? You know, like, what are you really struggling between? What are the thoughts, the beliefs, the needs, the desires that maybe are screaming at you, telling you they're not getting met, seen, fulfilled? And really kind of taking an inventory, which I think is very similar to a lot of what you talk about in your jealousy framework, taking an inventory of those needs and boundaries, and really what is happening, and being the benevolent parent of these voices in you, and establishing, well, if there are needs that are not getting met, can I do more to meet those, you know, by myself and with my partners?
Yeah.
And if there are elements that are more about just really bringing love to a place that is not really defined by a unfulfilled need, but just wants some love and attention, like, can I give myself that?
Mhm.
Like, doing really the process of healing and establishing and evaluating, like, what is that pain trying to tell me?
Right.
And for a lot of us, I think, we never really gave ourselves that space, you know, like, we never were pushed into that space of looking at everything that jealousy brings up, all of these spaces of scarcity and, sometimes low self-esteem or lack of self-love or just insecurity. And it can be insecurity in the relationship. Like maybe the relationship needs some tuning up. Maybe the relationship agreements need to be readjusted. Maybe you need better communication, more transparency, building more trust. Maybe your metamor is not someone you trust. Like there's so many things that can cause you to be in a Comperstruggle, and the more you understand it, then the more you can take appropriate action.
Right.
So there's an opportunity to learn all kinds of things in that situation.
Right. Right.
Great.
Yeah.
And there's all of that complexity that you just named, Marie. Like there are tools, there are methods, like there are so many different ways to address any of that. And all of them, they rely on the idea that you believe you can create your relational reality, right? Like you get to take steps. And I think when jealousy happens, I see a lot of people struggle because they really want their partner to fix it. And so they disempower themselves and forget that in fact the emotions going on within me, and there's a lot of stuff I can do in my relational reality that starts with me. And when it comes to Comperstruggle, some of that might be really getting clear on what your relational values are. Did you choose non-monogamy? Are you choosing a conscious monogamy where you are really being super clear with yourself that your jealousy, if you've got agreements and your agreements are being kept, then your jealousy is yours to work with and to keep working with, and your partner can assist you in that. But them continuing to, clamp down their relational connections so that you won't feel it, it's not a good long game. That can be helpful in a short term, acute situation, but in the long game, there is going to be this, we have to allow transformation and transmutation to happen. And that is, we can't rush it, but we also have to be able to imagine that we can get there. And that's where I find people get a little clamped down, is they can't imagine a world where jealousy and compersion could coexist, much less a world where they would actually thrive and enjoy watching their partner have their pleasure, right? And that is the paradigm shift. It is, and it doesn't happen instantaneously, and not in my experience anyways. That tends to happen over the course of time as you practice, as you said, being the person you mean to be in relationship. And like you continually choose who you want to be in the face of, sometimes pretty intense discomfort.
And so is this an opportunity to tweak agreements?
And to my mind, absolutely. Sometimes we find out through our Comperstruggle that we don't have the agreements we thought we had. Well, like so many people, I don't know what happens in your practice, Marie, but in my world, a lot of people come to me saying that they have agreements, but they don't really. They have a lot of implicit expectations and a lot of stuff that they've talked about. They may have had lots of discussions, but there's a lack of clarity around how their agreements will be enacted and what will happen and what the consequences will be, how they'll support each other if there are violations of those agreements, like what will happen next. And that doesn't have to be punitive, just what will happen next. How will we support each other to come back together and do the repair? And so that's where, to my mind, it's not just about tweaking your agreements, but making sure that you've actually got agreements that are complete and aren't just suggestions for we should be nice to each other. We should, treat each other with respect. That's a big one I hear. Our relationship agreements are to treat each other with respect. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need more specifics. I need more specifics, because what does that mean for you to feel respected? How would you want my behavior to be? How would that look, sound, feel? And because
boy, that can vary hugely from relationship to relationship. I brought a whole bunch of habits of what I thought was respectful to you, and it was just like the complete opposite.
It was not respectful to me.
Was not respectful.
Because it was things like, for instance, Ken came from a relationship where the emphasis was on not sharing any more details than were
That's
necessary.
what I was thinking. Exactly.
Don't
Yep.
share details. But my body finds safety in having lots of details, lots of transparency.
It can be respectful to not bother you with something, or it can be respectful to give you everything so you have the whole picture. They're both valid. It depends entirely on the people involved.
Right.
So there's
Right.
so many different ways this can go. And I'm hearing you both talking about imagination and agreements, and it all is coming down, like they all have this common thread of presence. Like, who are you actually in relationship right now? How does the things you're feeling, you know, how do they hold up against the relationships that you're in right now?
Right.
Yeah, good job with the word. We need this. We need to be able to see this and see the opportunity that it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Marie, do you find that people are struggling? Is there a struggle for people around this idea of but I want to feel spontaneous, embodied compersion. I don't want to just be in the attitudinal part. Like I just want to, because I see that in my world quite a bit. Like there's some resentment around, like if one partner feels compersion really easily, Ken happens to feel compersion very easily. It just flows really simply for him, lucky him. And I got to work at it. It takes effort. I have to grind and work a little. And I've noticed myself, and I've noticed clients who feel they're frustrated that it takes effort. And I'm just curious if it comes up for you.
Yeah, I see that all the time. I actually do often have clients who come to me and say, listen, I am there on the attitudinal compersion front. I really want my partner to be happy. We have great agreements. We get along well. And yet I can't really overcome that part of me that keeps getting triggered and keeps getting jealous when my partner goes out on a date. And, you know, like there can be an aspect where I have to kind of help calm people down of like, this is not a stick you should beat yourself with.
Yeah.
Because this idea that you should be feeling something can then create another layer of shame and problem that can make the actual, you know, potential progress towards embodied compersion even more difficult. So sometimes just kind of releasing control over what we're feeling can be a first step.
Yeah.
And then, you know, oftentimes there are maybe needs that are not getting met, even if it's not within the relationship, like all the agreements are fine, but maybe the person really shifts once they have a date with someone else on their side, and there's more of a sense of mutuality, or they feel more empowered, they feel more free from their end. And that could not necessarily have been manufactured, you know, like that spontaneous compersion. A lot of it is contextual.
Right.
And it's not something we can necessarily just will ourselves into.
Right. And we're swimming. I think it bears mention that we swim in a sea of monogamy right now.
Yes.
Like we're in this. And so if I currently am not seeing anyone who's, you know, I'm really like bonding with, and my partner, my anchor partner who I see every day is, then a certain level of jealousy may just be existing, in part because I turn out to the world that just keeps banging me over the head with the idea that my life is wrong, my identity is wrong, how I do relationships is wrong. And so that part is really challenging. This is like, there's this constant unpacking that I see people have to do. And I just want to say, like, if that's you, if you're one of the people who has to constantly unpack monogamy because somebody keeps sneaking it back in your bag, I see you, I hear you, like me too. That is hard. And that is why, like, it's why both of us do this work in the world. It's because we're swimming upstream. It's not going to be the easiest right now. My experience is over 15 years, it has gotten a lot easier. And that being out about my relational identity actually for me has actually made it much easier, because I can talk freely and I can be really open with more people in my life which actually means that less people are thwacking me with the monogamy stick. And that means I get less, I feel more free to experience jealousy come and go. Like, oh, it comes, but I don't feel like it doesn't have the same intensity now because I'm not being malicious to it. I'm not saying, oh my God, jealousy's here, so now we all have to freak out. And I'm patient. And that I, not everybody is ready, willing, or able to be out. But in my experience, it got a lot easier. The more people knew, for me, the easier it got.
Right. And that totally matches my research. Like, I can't tell you enough how many people have told me, like, I really got into a compersive space once I got really involved in a non-monogamous community. And I was able to witness other people having compersion and just, being next to their partner when they're making out with someone else and feeling fine. And once I realized that it could be fine, then I let it be fine.
Yeah.
We learn by example. We imitate each other.
I think I might be the first one to ever say this, but humans are social. And we learn from each other. Yeah, that being in a context where things are happening that we think we're the only ones doing,
well,
what a feeling, what a weight off.
You gotta see it to be it. Is that I think that's the common phrase. And I don't know whether you gotta, but the idea of actually seeing people living in this different paradigm. A paradigm is something you are ensconced in. It's something you are completely immersed in. Like, that's why we use the word paradigm here. So to be able to submerge yourself in that does change things. Just like when people go through, if you go through a big learning experience, you go put yourself at university, all of a sudden you're a different person because you're in a different container. So if you have the capacity, even if you're not out in your regular life, you may be able to immerse yourself in some spaces, whether that be for a weekend or a week or in a regular meeting that happens near you, or we run a community for the same reason. It's because having the ability to see other people in the wins, the learns, in the struggles, it does change how it feels to be in it.
Yes, the power of community.
Yes.
I think this is a good place to wrap because we could unpack this term more, and I'm sure we will in the future. But Marie, thank you so much. Thank you for inventing this word with me. So excited.
Thank both of you for the work you two do in the world. It is so valuable. Thank you.
So awesome.
I'm so glad we got over our Comperstruggle and just really transitioned into a place of pure collaboration and love and compersion with one another. I think this is so divinely orchestrated, not to be too woo-woo, but the fact that we actually have had that in our relationship and now we're able to really articulate it. And it was lucky that we got along so well and we didn't have to struggle for very long. But
it was. And the timing could not have been more on point for the universe to have said, I think you're going to need an object lesson with this one. Would you just, how about that? How about that? That sounds good.
Also, you could both use a friend. Here you go.
I so appreciate you. And tell everybody where they can find more about you as well.
Yes. So go to whatiscompersion.com and there you can book a free 30-minute introductory session if you're interested in coaching one-on-one. You can also download a Compersion worksheet, and that will help you identify where the struggle might be and where your Compersion strengths might be in your current relational ecosystem. And also follow me on Instagram at love_insight_dating.
Yay. I love that. Follow everything Marie does. All those links will be in the show notes. Marie, it was such a pleasure to have you. And Ken, thank you for guiding our conversation so we could just chat.
Here.
Sending you lots of love. Thank you so much.
There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliquiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com, and find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.